Well, we have a legal practitioner joining us now. Here's Mr. Isaac Anumudu, and he's also a policy analyst. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you very much, and thank you.
Well, I'm sure you heard Mr. Daniel Boala there, and I'm sure you heard some of the points that he raised. Do you agree with him that this is not a battle line between, the Senate and the executive arm of government?
I know Barrister Boala is a learned colleague, but with all due respect to him, I beg to disagree strongly with a whole lot of the positions he took on this Magu issue. Mm-hmm. And the two things he said, which I agreed with, are one, he agreed that the issue of fight against corruption has become very critical, very important for the progress, prosperity, and sustainability of this country. Much of the security crisis we see all over the country, much of the economic crisis we are seeing can be traced to corruption one way or the other. So if the president must succeed, the anti-corruption war must succeed. And so when we deal with this issue, we must not patronize the president. We must be sincere to him. We must be very supportive. In our supporting the president, we must be very sincere and wholehearted, because that war must succeed. That's one correct thing he said. And I will extrapolate on that subsequently. The second thing he said was that Magu is not the only person who can do the job. He even said there are other people who can do the job much better than Magu. Mm-hmm. If that is so, why are we personalizing this anti-corruption fight? Why is it being handled as if it's all about Magu, instead of the institution of the EFCC and the fight against corruption? Because if we see it from that altruistic perspective, then why is this even an issue? Why should anybody be supporting, encouraging the president to resubmit Magu's name? With all due respect.
What was wrong? I mean, if we saw the procedure,
yeah,
this was not according to a number of even senators, they disagreed that it was not an outright rejection. Some of them felt that what had happened on the floor of the Senate when they held the executive committee, the executive session, was to give leeway to the president to address some of the issues that they had raised, and for those issues to be addressed. Now, if that is the case, if the president has addressed those issues and he believes that they are non-issues, isn't it right, or isn't it within his right to represent his name?
First of all, don't forget that apart from being a policy analyst, I'm talking in my capacity as a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And we must always go by the law. I stand to be corrected, irrespective of what anybody else may feel. The law does not even give the president the power to resubmit Magu's name. The law establishing the EFCC was very clear on the issue of appointment of the chairman of the commission and members of the board. It says in section 2, subsection 3, that the chairman and members of the board of the commission shall be appointed. The word used is shall, mandatory. Shall be appointed by the president subject to the confirmation of the Senate. Period. It didn't talk about resubmission. It didn't talk about where the Senate rejects, they can be resubmitted. There's no such provision.
But there is no law against it either.
If there is no law against it, either.
There's a law that says it cannot be resubmitted.
I'm not saying that there's a law that says it cannot be resubmitted, but in a peculiar case like this, when we are dealing with the anti-corruption czar, the head of the EFCC, we must look at both the spirit and the letter of the law. Just like some people faulted, why didn't the Senate give Magu a hearing? Why was he not given fair hearing? Again, that is a misunderstanding of the law. Because if you look at the law setting up the EFCC, the Senate is not required to hear the EFCC chairman. The Senate is not required to take a hearing. The Senate is either to approve or reject. And the issue of approval or rejected was deliberately made like a confusion until the spokesman of the Senate reclarified it over and over and said, we hereby reject. And if they hereby reject, and that name has been rejected, I was even very surprised that Magu was still sitting as acting chairman of EFCC until we're now even talking about resubmitting his name. We must be very careful here. Fortunately, I don't know Magu on a personal basis. I may have met him in a public forum, but I don't have anything for or against him. I'm not being investigated by the EFCC, so we're not talking about corruption fighting corruption, as they would easily have said.
Which is something we cannot rule out in all of this.
Yes.
Can we rule that out?
We can rule that out in this particular instance.
How can we
if we cannot rule out corruption, fighting corruption in the case of the judges. Because you see, we must have a standard in this country. This thing should be seen as beyond Magu, beyond EFCC. We're talking about the future of our country. We're talking about other nations respecting us. We're talking about every Nigerian being able to buy into the anti-corruption fight of the president.
Let us go back into, let's take a bit of history. Now, we know that Mr. Magu, as Mr. Bola pointed out, he's no stranger to the EFCC. He's been in the EFCC for quite a while. He's been in the EFCC investigating, I think, since about the time of Mr. Ribadu, when some investigations were carried out in the EFCC. And we do know that he must have stepped on some powerful toes. In fact, a book, I think it's a book written by Mr. Adebanwi, Wale Adebanwi, chronicling, I think, Nigeria, a paradise. I think I can't remember the name of the book now. I would remember it shortly, and I'll tell you about the name of that book. But if you read that book, now there are some articles, there are some areas of that book that talks about some investigations that Mr. Magu himself undertook, which saw him being demoted at some point and being redeployed at some point under another administration. And it would seem that some of those people are now powerful people within this government. But can we really rule out the fact that he might have stepped on some powerful toes, and that's the reason why some allegations have been brought up against him, especially when you look at the fact that there were 2 security reports, on Mr. Magu?
We're even missing the point completely. I know the time you're talking about. This is all the reasons why we need to be very careful. Because, like I said, I have nothing against Magu, neither have anything for him. I have something for the country. We should, at this level of maturity, be talking as statesmen. And those of us who are younger should be curious, eager to correct the mistakes and errors of the past, where decisions about appointments, promotions were taken based on tribal, ethnic, religious, or any other sentiment. I know him, I don't know him. No, it should be based on what is right. If a country like in America, Hillary Clinton could be said to have lost election just because the FBI or the CIA was investigating something. She wasn't even indicted. She wasn't even confirmed that she committed an offense. But somebody whose character has question.
That swayed the public. I mean, that's different. If, for instance, the public wasn't convinced otherwise.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So if such people now begin to see in Nigeria a situation where a person that has been indicted, whether rightly or wrongly, but indicted now by a serious agency like the DSS.
Isn't that important?
Yes.
You just said whether rightly or wrongly. Isn't that important? The fact that somebody who is heading an investigative agency, yes. That the person be accused wrongly. Yes. Isn't it important?
Fine. That's the point we're making here. A country should grow from, if you remember, in this simple forum, I was one of those who argued seriously that the judges, before they would be asked to resign, before they would be asked to step down from their position based on the EFCC indictment, that they should first be given fair hearing, because theirs is a criminal nature. And the Constitution, under Section 36, says that before you are convicted, you should be given fair hearing. But despite the overriding provision of the Constitution, Nigerians felt that for their trial to be seen as transparent, and for them to hold that office in trust on behalf of Nigerians, they should first step aside. Even though we do know that, yes, there may be 1 or 2 bad eggs among the judges, but some of those judges are completely innocent. We do know. Some of them, we know them. But then, yet, Nigerians felt that they should step aside, and after they have been cleared, they can sit, so that people can have confidence in what they do. If it is so with the judges, why should it be different with Magu? That's the question.
How can that be the case in this instance, if at the end of the day, you were saying that the Senate, has every right to reject him on some security reports? He will be rejected and he will not go back to the... Well, where's the second chance?
He mustn't go back to the EFCC chairmanship. Don't forget that the issue of confirmation or non-confirmation is not a right. It's a privilege. Magu is still a senior police officer, don't forget. His real job is not EFCC chairman. He is only seconded to EFCC. He is still a police officer and will still remain a police officer. The rejection by the Senate does not deprive him from still going back to his regular police duties. It's only the Senate is saying that for a man to head this body called the EFCC, so that other countries will respect our anti-corruption fight.
How is that good for morale, Mr. Anumudu, if, for instance, he is rejected based on spurious allegations? How is that good for for morale, for his personal morale, and even for the morale of the person who's going to come and head that particular agency?
It hasn't been said that it was a spurious allegation. An indictment by the DSS cannot just be called spurious. Don't forget, indictment by the DSS in the past has led to the dropping of several nominations, even ministerial nominations.
No, you said that, if he is wrongly or rightly accused. Now, I'm saying that if he is wrongly accused, where is the second chance in that?
I am not saying that he is wrongly accused, please. Don't get me wrong.
You said if it's rightly or wrongly.
I'm saying that,
yes.
I'm just telling you the critical nature of perception when you're holding a sensitive position like that of EFCC chairman. It's like Caesar's wife. You should be above board completely. There should be no skeletons in the cupboard, no matter how thin or how small.
So are you saying that you doubt the investigations of the Attorney General? Why will the Senate, beg your pardon, the President be representing his name to the Senate if that investigation has not been conclusively
Don't forget,
done?
that is again one of the things I am not comfortable about, the way we do things in this country. We should start doing things rightly. Here was a case where the Senate didn't tell us that it was only because of indictment. They only cited that as one of the reasons. Many Nigerians, not just the Senate, even some of us lawyers, have not been very comfortable with the way the EFCC has been going on under Magu. Not because I have any relation or personal interest in the work of the EFCC, but a situation where the EFCC has been reduced to literally an instrument of witch hunting of the opposition of the present government. It's not the kind of EFCC we Nigerians are wishing for. We are praying for. And that must have also worked in the minds of the senators when they rejected Magu. A situation where, if you check under Magu's leadership, look at what you are giving an example. He was there under Ribadu. Under Ribadu's leadership, even persons that were very close to the president, Obasanjo, then were arrested, prosecuted, and jailed. We haven't seen that in this case. I give an example, just a very simple, clear example. There was the president's friend, one Issa, who was caught in the arms deal probe. He was said to have taken 100 million. He quickly, something was done, he quickly refunded the money, and we're not hearing about it today. Now, but there was other persons too, who was in the same arms deal probe. The person offered to refund the money because of ill health, so that I can also be let off the hook. That person is still standing trial. You're applying different standards for different people, and Nigerians are aware and watching these things. It does not speak well for holistic mobilization of every Nigerian to join the president in fighting this war, which we must win, which the president must win.
Quickly, in 1 minute, what do you expect to see happen on the floor of the Senate today?
Yeah, what I expect, like I said initially, a wrong step has been taken. The first thing should have been for Nigerians to be told the outcome of the investigation by the Attorney General. Even though some people have reservations about that, it shouldn't be executive investigating executive in a matter like this. But at least Nigerians should have been told the outcome before his representation. Because if now the report has not been out or was out or whatever is the case, that representation has already overtaken that report. The Attorney General can no longer ever give a report indicting or against Magu's confirmation again. So that step, the Senate will need to look into that. Secondly, the Senate will need to review now the reasons why it did not confirm Magu in the first place. And if it feels strongly convinced that those reasons had not been adequately dealt with, the Senate should still go ahead and stand by that rejection. Because I heard a newspaper talking about the presidency having set up a lobby group to lobby the Senate. Let us not see a situation where appointment of the anti-corruption czar to be the outcome of a lobby. No, it shouldn't be that at all.
Well, Mr. Isaac Anumudu, I have to say thank you very much for coming on Sunrise Daily.